Okay, let me tell you a little bit about Graham. He's worked with business and technology for over 30 years now. Been involved with over 250 businesses, including Nike, Procter & Gamble, J.P. Morgan, General Motors, Disney, Autodesk, as well as many, many small and medium-sized, as well as startup businesses across North America, Europe, and Asia. He's been around the block a few times, it sounds like. From 3D design to artificial intelligence, from grid computing to automotive, and financial services to utilities, he has helped organizations address the tough challenges beyond their previous experiences. And he's the author, let's hold this up, author of this great book, Trusting Technology, Mastering Technology for Non-Tech Leaders. Graham, thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure.
From Canada, folks. Good to have you here.
International guest.
That's right. One of many. I found it fascinating. You've worked with over 250 companies, from giant organizations like Nike, P&G, Disney, General Motors, and smaller companies too. What have you learned? And maybe dichotomize the difference between the smaller companies as well as the giant ones.
Yeah, for sure. So, first of all, I'm very pleased to be here. This is a great group, and I've said that to you over lunch. It's fantastic. So it's an honor to meet you guys. I started out with technical training. I did a computer science degree, and so to me, technology always felt like the easy part. And it's changed a lot in the last 30 years, but it still does. But I think, Doug, the thing that I've learned most is it's a form of humility, but it's important to understand that it's not the technology, it's how we pick our investments, our bets, how business decides how to use technology, and then how it makes it native to the business, how it helps all the employees, colleagues, and customers adopt technology. That's really the key. These are the tools people use to do their jobs every day. If you change those tools, you're messing with their world. Another example, you mentioned Nike. We went into Nike, completely different business. They produce, at the time, we're talking 15 years ago now, about 3,500 shoe designs every year,
wow,
of which maybe 50 make it to the shelves in the stores that you would actually see. So this is a big process. They had 100 designers around the world, and again, they would sketch on paper and they would turn these into 3D models. But before we helped them out, they were actually creating prototypes. So they would produce 3,000 prototypes, which is a long process. We helped them move to a digital design process, so they used one of the early tablets. Does anyone remember the early tablets before the iPad came out, right? So these thick, funky things. And they'd start to sketch their designs, they'd bring that into a 3D model in the computer, and it would cut down the number of prototypes they had to create by about 100 times.
Wow.
The important thing is, they got immediate visceral feedback on the designs. So it helped them design better. It took advantage of their innate design skills. And the prototypes could be churned out way faster. So we shaved, at the time, I think Nike's time from design to shoes on the store shelf was about 18 months. We helped them cut that down to 14 months, I think it was. It's public domain information now. I couldn't have told you about this 12 years ago without being arrested, but it is public domain now. But the key, again, is we're crafting the tools to complement the skills of the people who are using it. And I don't care if you're talking about shoe design or automotive design or payroll. You still have to look at technology in that light, I think.
But, at the same time, I think it's so interesting, technology and tech is hyped so much, in press, and we hear about it all the time. Maybe a little biased, but, do you feel it it lives up to the hype?
It kind of excited me into this career many years ago, then it started to annoy me. I just found that the technology marketing and hype was a distraction. But I came to a realization some time ago that we essentially evolve and advance through aspiration. And technology hype has a way of teeing up the ball, saying we can do this, or we could do that. And that inspires people to try and solve that problem. So is the hype overrated? Is it merited? I think the answer is yes, it is merited, eventually. But without that kind of inspiration, without people setting these challenges, there are all kinds of wild claims made around what artificial intelligence can do for the world. Exactly. I believe, 90% of that is not going to happen. But without that kind of inspiration, people aren't going to pursue those things. So good will come of it all. Nike was inspired by work that went on in automotive. I worked with General Motors and Nike, and we used to joke that they're both in the transportation business, right? Because it was Nike footwear. But they looked at the way automotive had sped up their design process. You probably know, but it used to be that you would produce maybe 100 life-size scale models out of clay to review a new car design. Wow. Takes $1 billion to bring a new car design to market, and I'm just talking about an upgrade, not a whole new model. And it was an artisan skill to create those clay models. They're beautiful. They're expensive.
To say the least.
So by digitizing that, we were able to help General Motors, Ford, Toyota, practically every automotive company in the world actually style their vehicles with 2 or 3 clay models, which again, reduced the time it took to bring to market. So Nike looked at that, and they actually started hiring. The guy that designed the original Hummer later became a shoe designer for Nike. Wow. So they started hiring people in from that industry, but that was a classic example. This is working over there. If they can do it for cars, we can do it for shoes. And they did. To me, digital transformation is about using technology to continually upgrade your business so that your operations generally get better. They might get faster, they might get cheaper, they might bring you whole new capabilities. You might get more information to make your decisions on. But without that value, digital has no value at all. I'd say technology, information technology does just 2 things. And I think keeping it simple is a great mantra of all of this. It either helps create insight by making sure the right information is with the right people at the right time, or it helps automate things we can automate. It helps elevate the skills of your best people by taking the grunt work away from them, having them press a button and maybe do 90% of what they do today, and they still engage in that extra 10%. So any technology investment you make, run that test by them. If it's not improving insights somewhere inside your organization or for your customers, or helping to speed up the process, make it more efficient, it's just not worth it. Don't do it.
So when you get involved in an organization, what do? You know, you're working, say, with a non-tech manager, which really is the focus of your book. What do you do? How do you get them up to speed where they're making those changes that's coming up and from a positive venue?
Yeah. So we generally have 1 or 2 conversations. It really doesn't take more than, a couple of 30-minute conversations to get an idea of what the business is all about, what the context is, what the circumstances are. And then I typically help my advisory clients understand other examples of that I believe are applicable to their business. Sometimes that takes research on my part. Sometimes, and I've seen this amongst the 250 businesses or so. But I think it's all about saying, is there something here that will inform your vision for your company and how it uses technology? So that's where it starts, because every leader has to be comfortable this is going to work. They have to make that leap. I think at that point, then we say, well, how do we bring the organization on board? How do we get them to participate? And what does this mean, most importantly, for your customers? If they're not going to notice the benefit of a technology investment that you've done, is it really worth it? It might be, but there's usually a better bet that is customer facing. So we put that together, we create a plan. And then I'll advise and coach their teams to the extent that I can, helping them, because usually folks haven't taken on this kind of work in the past. If you've got a team that's done this a lot, then you know how valuable they are. But a lot of teams need to build that success first. Bringing change into organization, I'm sure you've all done that in your teams. There has to be a win for people. Otherwise, they'll sit on the fence or maybe they'll resist, right? I think too often this change is imposed, and that's when it fails. And it fails every time.
So you got to get people on board first from your perspective before you make an investment like that.
I think you have to be comfortable that you'll be able to get them on board. Then you can make the investment, but then you do the hard work of getting on board. If we expect to hire ready-made experts in everything, we're limiting our options. What I've seen work really well amongst all the organizations that I've worked in that have succeeded here is they help their teams get good at what they need to get good at. Now, that doesn't mean you turn everyone into a software developer or a database expert, But it does mean you recognize that the job of redesigning your business is not for IT to do. It's for your whole organization. Some things that work really well, I think, is pull small teams together. I'm talking 5 or 6 people. They could be your best people. They could be average people, but pull them together and give them a stretch goal. Give them a challenge, an assignment, and then set them up for wins through that. Great teams thrive on wins. If we assign goals to people that they are never going to meet, they're never going to gain that confidence. But over time, they'll grow in confidence. Bring in outside expertise to advise, but don't ever get dependent on it. Bring in coaches, create a coaching culture. Just make sure that you spread the expertise around the organization. I think that's vital. So if we look at expertise as a finite resource, I think we're doing a disservice to the untapped talent that lies around our organizations. We were talking at lunch about James Dyson. We were comparing him to Steve Jobs, I think, because I think he has a similar obstinance about what's right for the market. But he's done a lot of great things in his business. And by the way, he describes his business as, I just move air around, right? They're not a vacuum company. They just move air around, which is why you can buy $500 hair dryers now often. But he hires very talented engineers, and he trains them in design. So if you think about that, right? If he was going to go out and find an engineer who's a great designer, wouldn't find him. But if you bring in those skills and you develop the complementary skills, you're really building out a much better rounded team. And I think their products are great. I don't know. I've got several of them, but not a hairdryer. I don't.
I mean, it's so interesting. Warren Buffett always talks about, he likes the nice, boring companies. He didn't buy anything in technology in the early 2000s. He didn't get hurt, but he missed a good run. I mean, do you still think there's still room for those type of companies? Or, I mean, if you're not on the board with technology, you're just going to be left behind?
Absolutely there is. But I would point out that Warren Buffett owns a lot of insurance companies. And insurance is a technology business, right? It's technology-enabled gambling, I believe. I mean,
it's an actuarial skill.
It is, yeah. And, insurance companies use some of the biggest hardware farms, and they're fairly well advanced in the use of artificial intelligence. So what's interesting there is that the technology is hidden behind the scenes, but it's completely empowering for whether or not that insurance company succeeds or fails. So I would take issue with Warren on that one.
You're a small side, small to mid, we got this discussion where it really is small and mid, but you want to get your technology working together. I find the biggest challenge, there's lots of good technology, but really, how do you interact? Simply making QuickBooks work with your estimating, and what makes that, what is the role, who's the real person to get that all to work together and show opportunities that maybe aren't being used to be efficient? Because to Doug's point, we brought in new technology a couple of years back, and it took a considerable amount of time to get the team up. And then I get somebody else, well, let's switch. If I went in there and told my office right now I was going to switch our main, they'd hang me.
Yeah.
But was it worth it, Joe? Was it worth it going through all the pain?
I think it is now, but there's still missing parts, and everybody tries to build this software that meets all needs in one company, and I haven't found that to ever be really true.
No, it really isn't. The bigger the organization, the bigger the challenge. How big's your company, just by way of example?
Let's say 45 employees.
Okay, so you're all in the same building on a regular basis?
Yeah, well, let's say 15 are in the office, the rest are...
Yeah, but everyone's known to everyone else, so there's a good rapport, right? So when you brought in the system, what kind of a system?
We're remodeling. Custom remodeling. That sort of thing.
Okay. So how many people in the organization were involved in either the decision or the actual design of getting it to work? Did everyone?
Well, what we found out, because I had been through this sort of before, I had some custom software written for another company. And the problem with that is when somebody leaves and they design that software, you're left holding the bag.
Yep.
So off the shelf is generally better.
Yep.
From an update standpoint. But what we did was we decided just to implement a piece of it instead of throwing this whole big massive system, because we wouldn't have gotten buy-in otherwise. So
good.
over a 2-year period, we just said, okay, now you have to use this, now you have to use this. So I would say if I was honest with myself, maybe 80% there.
Yeah, after 2 years. Yeah. And did anyone encourage you to think it would take less time.
Well,
than
they
that.
all say 30 days,
Yeah.
online training, you're good, you know.
Yeah,
I know that's not true.
yeah.
But from a consultancy standpoint,
Mhm.
where would someone reach out, someone here that wants to, like, what is the best avenue to say, okay, how do I make all this work better?
Right. So, are you talking about now to fix what you've got, or 2 years
just,
ago?
Even to take what you have now and say,
Yeah.
okay, maybe we could use the cloud better, maybe we could, you know.
Yeah. Well, you can start by buying my book, of course.
Yeah. That was kind of a softball.
Thank you. Yeah, I got it eventually.
Good job, Joe.
I'm English. I'm very gentle on that kind of thing. But no, I appreciate it. I mean, here's how I'd answer that question. People begin conversations with me for one of two reasons, generally. It's either because they're intrigued by what technology could do for their business, and they don't quite know yet, or they've got a theory and they want to validate it, or something's broken. And when we have the something's broken problem, either we didn't ship at the end of the quarter because the system was down, or because we had a security breach, whatever it is, we say, okay, let's fix that, but let's fix it in a way that means you don't have that problem going forward. So you might have to pull the phone out of the lion's paw and fix it immediately. It sounds to me like you're comfortable that things are on track, but your expectations were misset a couple of years ago by the influences you had.
Yeah,
right?
I kind of know now.
Yeah, you've learned that.
I've learned
The hard way,
that's
yeah.
not always true, so I take it with a grain of salt. But I think there's an opportunity for a lot of small businesses who don't understand. There's technology is just this big term, and there's like, just buy this software, but how do we make it work within a company that doesn't make you take longer to do the task?
Yeah.
And use the things. Some things aren't work usually for a certain company. So I think people could use, at least in my knowledge, and my other groups, that they need someone to help them get off that.
Yeah. The problem with the technology industry is that you can circle yourself with vendors and they'll all sell you their piece of the pie. But strategically, I think ultimately the CEO needs to say, does this fit? And actually that is, since you threw me the softball, that is my sweet spot. That's where I work. I won't tell you something's going to work in a year if it's not.
Going out and getting new consulting clients, do you find that this approach is very novel to people, or do you think it's something that people think they know and don't?
It's novel, and then it turns into intrigue, I would say.
Okay.
Like, to your point, I'll start by saying how I got to where I am, opinion-wise, is I was a CTO in a number of software companies for about a decade, producing and selling software. And that was the circumstances where I met Alex. I keep going back to him, my favorite guy. Then I was a CIO buying technology into companies, so I saw it from both sides. So I tried to make technology fit for customers, and I tried to make it fit for my business. And that's where I reached this conclusion. Hey, it's not about the technology, right? So when you say that to people, to your point, it's a bit foreign because they're used to people coming and saying, this is the best thing, you've got to do it, and it will work, and we'll do it overnight. So when people say something different, it kind of grabs their attention. And I think when you say, it overlaps with how you upgrade your organization, change your operations, how you manage your team, if you will. Generally, it's very receptive, and it works. So technology isn't smart enough to make mistakes. It can only do what we tell it to do. So if we use it responsibly, I have confidence that it will lift society. Now, will some people get left behind? That's always been the case in the past. I don't see why that would change, and what do we do about that? There are certainly some interesting ethical questions, particularly around artificial intelligence. And every day we hear of companies that are selling our data, because it's our data, right? Yours and mine, without telling us.
Exactly.
That's a tech-enabled problem. But I believe that if it takes everybody to choose how to use this stuff responsibly.
If a CEO or somebody running a company is a little bit hesitant to pull that trigger, they want to get started, they don't want to get started, sort of like approach avoidance syndrome, what do you tell them? What's the magic words?
I tell them to, I mean, you all have a vision for your business. What I say is that vision enriched by technology to the point where you're comfortable? You have to make, you the CEO have to be comfortable this is the right thing to do. You don't have to know how to do it. And I think just studying and researching in the copious spare time that you don't have, what else is going on in this field that could be of value to your business, and talk to people who can and know, and there are plenty of people out there. But you have to be comfortable in your vision, and I think if you're comfortable in that, and it's going to stretch your organization but not break it, then you surround yourselves with the right people to get the work done. And that is why I wrote this book, because I don't see much in the literature that talks to this gap between inspirational business stories like Good to Great and the O'Reilly technology series, which some of you might be familiar with. If you're a deep techie, that you buy these books. If you're a business leader, I just could not find anything in the middle. So that's why I put the time into this book.
Thank you, sir. Graham, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.